Good morning, everyone. As you've just heard, I started off yesterday with a lecture on the concept of adult education for social change. I see this lecture as a continuation of yesterday's. So what I will be doing is synthesize what we said yesterday to give the background to today's lecture. As I do always, and I've been doing it for the past 32 years, this is my 32nd year in teaching, I go back and reflect on what I did. So I went back to my room, I reflected on what we did yesterday, and came back with almost a totally different lecture. So this is not the lecture I had prepared before I came to Estonia, but this is a lecture that I had prepared, yesterday with Paulo Freire, of course, in relief. So what I reflected yesterday is that I need to bring into the equation part of my experience, part of my biography, to show you that this is not just theory, but this is something that is happening, at least in my life. And this is where I get my credibility, It's not just, quoting this and that, but it's bringing in what I do. So this is a mixture of synthesis from yesterday. It's a project that I am working on, and obviously Paulo Freire in the background, but I will be referring to him as a reference. So it's Paulo Freire in action, not just the theory of Paulo Freire, and where professionals listen, parents as co-producers of knowledge. So the focus here would be on a project that I am embarking on, having worked with parents for the past, as I said, several years, involved at the national level, at a local level, at a training level. So let's go with this synthesis. Yesterday's lecture, it was focused on adult education for social change. And as I said yesterday, there are different ways of looking at adult education, and there are different ways of looking at social change. This is one perspective, the perspective that I uphold, the perspective that I subscribe to. And I'm not here to prescribe, I'm here to share with you. This has been my life for the past 30 years. So it is adult education from a social justice perspective. So basically when we talk social justice perspective, pedagogically we mean a commitment to two very important things. One, reading the world, the ability of an adult educator to be able to read the world together with the participants. So a commitment towards critical engagement with the world. So the world is not just a film going by, It's an episode, it's a moment, it's a history, it's a situation, it's a context, where adult educators are committed to read. So part of adult education for social change from a social justice perspective is this ability and this commitment to read the world. And not just read the world, but read the world critically. What Freire would refer to as the language of critique. But that is not the end of adult education for social change from a social justice perspective. We should be able to collectively then act on the world. So Freire talks about the language of critique and the language of possibility. These have to be welded together in order to talk about then transformation. So there's no transformation in adult education for social change unless there are these two dimensions coming together all the time. So it's reading the world and acting on the world. The language of critique welded with the language of possibility, coming together in a community of learning. So this is not about the academic preaching, prescribing. This is about creating a community of learning, creating a community of practice. And within this community, simultaneously and not chronologically, there is this language of critique and possibility informing each other at the same time. So basically, when we talk about adult education for social change, from a social justice perspective, we're talking about, a critique of the world that is, but also visualizing a world that is not. So there is a commitment to critique, but there is also a commitment for transformation. And for that to happen, Freire would speak about reclaiming utopia. Now, utopia in this world is becoming a dirty world. A utopia is reserved for people who just are idealistic. They dream. So adult education for social change is committed to reclaiming utopia. Reclaiming the ability to visualize a world that is not. How can we have a change or transformation unless we recover this ability to think, to visualize, to see a world that is not? Okay? Now, the world that is not, and this ability to visualize a world that is not, is the antidote, and in medicine we use this word, antidote to fatalism. Yesterday we spoke at length about one of the biggest enemies to transformation, the sense of helplessness, the sense of fatalism, the sense of there's nothing we can do, that I encounter all over the world, wherever I travel. There's nothing we can do. The problems are too big for us. We're too small, we're too isolated to do anything. So adult education for social change is committed to recovering this utopia, this ability to visualize a world that is not. Okay? Recovering this ability to think and to believe that we do have the ability to change things. And that is not easy indeed from my experience. Obviously, we talked about voice. So basically, what prescription does, what traditional teaching does in adult education, in academia, in primary, in secondary, etc., is basically reinforcing the culture of silence. See, listen, silence. Now, silence is a right. You have a right to be silent, but when silence becomes a product of pedagogy, then we have a problem. So adult education for social change in terms of pedagogy is committed to authentic dialogue. So dialogue is the pedagogy within this paradigm of adult education. We cannot contradict ourselves. If we are committed to transformation, if we are committed to change, then obviously that change has to be done together. And you cannot talk about collective and communality and education as a social act, and then you prescribe, and then you transmit, and then you dish out information for you to absorb and consume. That's a contradiction. So we have to think about alternative paradigms. We have to think about alternative pedagogies if we want to go to this paradigm shift in terms of the way we understand adult education. I skip that and I talk about this one, okay? The question of hope. There is no transformation unless educator transmits hope. Where there is fatalism, there is paralysis. Where there is paralysis, there's no way you can change. The moment the educator, okay, loses hope, that is the moment where the educator is dead. And Paulo Freire will talk about this necrophilic, notion of life. So you're alive, but you're dead because you have lost hope. Okay, so Freire talks about living the Easter every day. Easter is the resurrection. Easter is the victory of life over death. So the moment the educator loses hope is the moment where he or she is basically dead as a pedagogue. So adult education for social change is informed, is defined by this pedagogy of hope. He has a whole book dedicated to hope. It's called Pedagogy, of Hope. This is fundamental for transformation. An educator that does not transmit hope, an educator that does not believe in the language of possibility is basically dead. Freire would call him a necrophile, an educator dancing with death. Okay? That's what the metaphor for Freire is for, educators who lose hope. So basically, adult education for social change is, okay, a pedagogy based on hope, the embracing of life, biophilic, okay, which is the opposite of necrophilic. One is dancing with death, the other one is dancing with life. So if we believe in change, then obviously our pedagogy has to be informed by hope. Production of knowledge, this is very crucial. I talked yesterday about this issue. It was very fashionable in the 90s of empowering people. That's rubbish. You don't empower people. People are empowered through process, okay? So you cannot empower people by preaching at people. It's contradiction. You empower people by people becoming agents of change, producers of knowledge, discoverers of knowledge, dialoguing with others, etc., etc. So empowerment is not a product that you give. Empowerment is not a product that you sell. Empowerment is an experience. So you cannot think of empowerment unless you see adult participants engaged in the production of knowledge, in the understanding of the world, and in acting on the world. That's where empowerment, okay, comes in, through experience. Okay, so let's stop about this idea of empowering people. That is very patronizing, and it doesn't work that way. You do not give power to people. People are empowered by virtue of their action on the world, by virtue of the fact that they are active in the world. They are present in the world, not as objects of observation, but as subjects of history. This is Paulo Freire, okay? So I'm bringing in Paulo Freire indirectly. So this is what Paulo Freire would say, okay? Stop talking about empowering people. People are empowered by virtue of a pedagogy, of a curricular experience, where people are active agents of change and not passive receivers of knowledge, okay? That is a contradiction in terms. You cannot employ a pedagogy based on transmission and then you expect that you're empowering people just by telling them that they should be empowered. Empowerment is an experience. You gain power by virtue of the fact that you are understanding the world, you are contradicting the world, you are producing knowledge in the process, and then you're acting on the world. That is empowerment as understood by Paulo Freire and as I understand it. Okay? So empowerment is has nothing to do with an abstract concept, a theoretical concept. Empowerment is experiential. It is an experience that is gained through practice and through activity. So knowledge becomes power by virtue of a very powerful pedagogy which is based on dialogue and not transmission. Okay? Yes, I want to emphasize the issue of collectivity. Okay? We know that we are living through an age in education which is global, based on performativity. Performativity means pitting each other against each other. It's all about individualism, all about autonomous learning, all about autonomous training, all about standardization, all about performance. Adult Education for Social Change emphasizes the collective, the communal, okay? So education as a communal act. You cannot achieve transformation, okay, unless, or rather social transformation, unless you go back to adult education as a social act. So adult education is not individual. Adult education is not individuals in competition with each other. Adult education is about working in a community. So we talk about communities of learning, we talk about communities of practice, we talk about people in communion with each other, working collectively in dialogue. That's where dialogue comes in. You cannot dialogue with yourself. It's possible for a poet, yes, perhaps, okay? But basically, when we talk about dialogue, we're talking about interaction, meaningful interaction, enabling interaction, productive interaction, effective interaction. So I want to emphasize the concept of social, the concept of collective, and the concept of participatory democracy. You cannot have democracy unless you have people participating in that democracy. So when you see democracy, I take it for granted that people are agents within that democracy and not just objects of that democracy. We're not talking representation here. We're talking about actual participation, active participation, active engagement. So social, collective participation are the three key words that obviously define. Production of theory in action. For perhaps a few words about knowledge before we move on to the project. Okay, here we talk about different types of knowledges. Okay, in an academic atmosphere, if it's a traditional atmosphere, it's the expert's knowledge that counts. Okay, if obviously the academic or the adult educator is molded in the traditional way, obviously his or her knowledge counts. It's scientific knowledge. It's esoteric knowledge, we call it in English. Here we have, of course, validation of the expert's knowledge, but there is a lot of, respect for, intuition, experiential knowledge, etc. So knowledge, in this case of parents, as we're going to see, is a very important type of knowledge indeed, that within genuine adult education for social change is not only celebrated, but it's also validated. Okay? So there is an understanding that scientific knowledge is not the only valid knowledge as far as adult education for social change is concerned. Okay? We talked at length yesterday about respect. You cannot respect the other unless you validate the other's knowledge. Validating others' knowledge does not mean romanticizing other people's knowledge, as we said yesterday. If it's sexist knowledge, if it's racist knowledge, if it's homophobic knowledge, obviously that cannot be celebrated. Challenged, questioned, interrogated. Okay? That is the kind of exchanges that we have once we come into the real project. Okay? Finally, we talked about, participants, parents, whoever, okay, as intellectuals. Okay? People who can think, people who can engage. If you walk into a community of adults with this idea that I am the expert and the others, the participants, are there to listen to me, to be filled with my wisdom and knowledge, then of course you lost the battle. So we have to recognize the other as an intellectual in order to dialogue effectively with the other within the cultural circle. Obviously social actors, co-investigators, and co-researchers. I will skip this and I will move directly now to my project. Okay? So basically, doing things differently is possible. I've done tens of projects. I will not go to a project which is based in the community where I have a lot of free hand. I will focus on a project that is done in a very restricted space called university. Okay, I will give you the hardest scenario possible, working, okay, in a liberatory way, okay, within the institution called university. Okay, so that I will make it very hard for me, okay, to explain and to share with you. So I will obviously ignore all the projects I've done in the community. Usually I have a free hand there. Okay, I have lots of space to do lots of things. I will focus on a project that is based at university to show you, okay, that when I said yesterday, and when I talked yesterday about the intellectual who is resistant, who is subversive, this is what I mean by those words. So let's go ahead and see what obviously I did in terms of this project. Now, the challenge. First of all, you have to understand, you have to take, decisions. Yesterday I talked about positioning myself, locating myself, asking myself, where do I have to spend my very limited time outside university or within university? So basically for the past 25 years, I've been working with, in different categories with parents, because I know the power that family and parents have, okay, on educational success, on educational achievement, etc. Okay? So that has been my work for the past decades. Now we know in my country, so it all starts with a scientific reading of the word. This is not charity that we do here. This is not something that we do out of, emotions. Let's do something for parents. That's arrogant, okay? So we always start with a scientific situation. And the scientific situation in my country is that our government spends 6% of the GDP on education. That's a huge sum. The economy is booming, so basically the government is spending more and more on education. So that's the situation. Unfortunately, despite the fact that the government is spending so much and putting so much into resources, when you look at results, you will see that percentage-wise, we are still not at the level that we should be given the expenditure. But that is not enough. We continue to research that issue, and we found that the huge percentage of underperforming children are coming almost exclusively from working class families, from low socio-economic status families. Now that, from a social justice perspective, is a tragedy. That is a situation which for me is unacceptable. So we cannot say that we are happy with opening doors to everyone. Our education system is free, from childcare to university. Okay? So this is the question that people are asking. How come so much money, so many resources, okay, and everything is free, and so many services, and yet there's a huge percentage of children coming from low socioeconomic status who are obviously underperforming. So that is the challenge that obviously this project will respond to. So the starting point is scientific. We know this as an objective fact. This is not an emotional reaction. Let's do something. Okay? It doesn't work that way. It always starts with an objective situation that is evidenced, that is scientifically proven. So that's me as the academic for the time being. So basically, given my value system, I would naturally work with parents, but particular parents given the situation. So I'm dedicating all my time outside research in terms of what I've been saying since yesterday to lower socio-economic status parents, or in other words, working class parents. Because there is a correlation, very strong correlation, scientific correlation between low socioeconomic status and educational achievement, which exists everywhere, including in Estonia, but in my country, it's dramatic. And it's morally and ethically intolerable. We cannot let it go as it is. But why? Because obviously it's creating a divide within the country. So that is the scientific situation. Okay. Now, so basically, this project will benefit prospective teachers and in-service teachers, as well as low socioeconomic status parents. So this is a project. I wouldn't call it a project. This is actually a university course. So it's not a project outside. This is one of the courses I deliver. Okay, it's worth 10 ECTS. All right? So traditionally, I would go in, my colleagues would go in and start talking about parents, start talking obviously about sociology and parenting. These are very capable academics, but we realized that we're getting nowhere. And this is where, okay, we said, stop. Let's change the paradigm. So as far as training teachers is concerned, I can assure you that our team is one of the best teams possible. Highly qualified, internationally renowned. So once we give the lecture, okay, we can give a very good sociological account of what is happening back home. but it was leaving no effect at all on our students. So beautiful lectures, good guys, very well prepared people, very good researchers, but no impact at all on students. So this was the challenge. Okay? How can we engage students more productively, okay, in this area? And we saw that good lectures will have no effect. So it has nothing to do with academic level, it has nothing to do with science, it has a lot to do with pedagogy. So rather than being arrogant and saying, well, we're doing our best, this is our role as academics, just, show off our academia, we said we are not being effective. Students are not taking us seriously. We are not consistent. We talk about working with parents, but we just talk. We have to model. So this is where the paradigm shift starts. Being humble about it, okay? Taking students' feedback seriously, okay? Every course in our institution is audited. Students give feedback on each course, and sometimes the feedback is cruel. Rather than being arrogant, we stop, think, and change. So this course is responding to the fact that year after year, lectures after lectures, beautiful, how much they are, we were not being effective. So we had to change. I had to change, okay, my role and my pedagogy. So basically what we're talking about here, okay, and allow me to read, the design of the study unit is aimed at helping prospective educators attending a course in initial teaching education as well as in to engage productively and meaningfully in acts of knowing with parents of low socioeconomic status, okay? So engaging now with parents. So from the very beginning, you will see that parents are not talked about in this course, okay? Parents here are not objects of our investigation. They are protagonists. They are subjects. They will be involved from the word go, from the design of, okay, the course. And that is revolutionary by academic standards. Parents coming into the institution, involved in the design, involved in the development, and at the end involved in the assessment. How can this be? Yes, it's going to happen. Okay, and I will show you how, all right, in a minute. So this is the paradigm shift, okay, because we realized that lectures will get us nowhere, however good and scientific they are. So basically, this is a course, okay, that addresses all the issues that we talked about yesterday, and we've talked about, over the past, half an hour, okay, 30 minutes. So this is immediately realizable, that parents will no longer be objects, but become the protagonist, very much involved, in the development, the design of the curricular experience. Pedagogy, again, we had to stop preaching. We had to stop prescribing. We had to stop lecturing, okay? We can talk, as I said yesterday, for hours. I have no problem with that. But the question is, the moral question, the ethical question is, if I talk for hours, will I leave any effect on students? And the answer was no. So it was, good for me to show off, all right, my verbal, activities, okay, my verbal competence, etc. But that will stop there. No effect at all. So we had to change the pedagogy. We cannot just prescribe. We cannot just transmit. Our credibility was going down, okay, as we spoke, all right? So we had to recover that credibility by being consistent with the paradigm shift. So basically here, the design of the study unit revolves around the pedagogy of authentic dialogue. Now, Paulo Freire, let me bring him back, this differentiates between authentic dialogue and pseudo-dialogue. Pseudo-dialogue is when you come in, you already have the answers, you pretend that you are dialoguing with the other, but the answers are already here. That is pseudo dialogue. That is fake dialogue. A real dialogue, an authentic dialogue, is when you come in, you dialogue, and you open yourself to people's interrogation, to people's challenging. And as people are challenging each other, new knowledge is being produced. That is authentic dialogue, okay? When knowledge is being produced in the process, in action, as we speak, as we interact, as we engage, as we change views and ideas, etc. So authentic dialogue, Paulo Freire would call it as an act of creation, as an act of creation and recreation. Okay, that's where authentic dialogue really means. Okay, so basically, there is a commitment in this course not to prescribe, not to transmit, not to dish out information, but to produce knowledge collectively, and that can only be produced through what I refer to, borrowing for Freire, of course, the term authentic dialogue. So we made decision here, two decisions so far. One, to work with parents, not for parents, not on behalf of parents, but with parents, in a revolutionary way, the design of the curriculum, the development of the curriculum, the assessment of the curriculum. Secondly, major decision, scrap transmission of knowledge and make authentic dialogue as the main pedagogical tool. Okay, I will skip this. Outcomes now. In terms of knowing, now this is obviously confusing to bureaucrats in education or to bureaucrats in institutions. Because basically what bureaucrats would like to have is content in terms of syllabus. Okay? This is the expectation, at least back home. Before we start, long before we start, at least a year before we start, okay, we have to present outcomes, objectives, content, etc. to Senate for approval. Okay? Now this is something obviously very, very different here. Okay? So basically, okay, in terms of knowing, the study unit sets out, and you have all, you know, the outcomes here, all right? But basically what is this slide telling us, that while we know where we want to head, while we know, okay, what our values are, in terms of real content, that will come during the course. So basically what is revolutionary here, what is confounding for administrators here, is that in terms of content, I cannot show you the content right now, because the content is produced in collaboration with parents, because knowledge is produced in action. We cannot talk about knowledge in action and we go with a menu ready-made. So we know where we're heading, we know exactly where we want to go, we know exactly where the interactions would lead us in terms of, you know, the vision, but in terms of actual content, that is something which is produced in action. And that is the only way we can be consistent with the values that we spend an hour or more so discussing yesterday and today. So these are the outcomes. So for administrators, they would see that we do have outcomes, that we know exactly, okay, where we want to go in terms of our vision. But in terms of actual content, okay, that is something that will develop in the process. So it is knowledge in process. It is knowledge in action, okay, as it is produced. And I will explain at a later stage. Also, we talked about yesterday, it's not just rational, but very importantly, it's also emotional intelligence. Freire talks about, at length, about this dimension, okay? A missing dimension in many pedagogies, a missing dimension in many educational traditions, the emotional intelligence dimension. How can you work with someone if there is no empathy? How can you work with someone if there is emotional distance? So one of the main goals, and it is a very important goal, okay, outcome in terms of emotional intelligence, is to develop empathy with low socio-economic status parents, with working class parents. Most of the students, okay, who come to our courses have a lot to say about working class parents. But these people would never have smelt a working class parent, never touched a working class parent, never heard a working class parent, never saw and never been to these areas. So there is this emotional distance that needs to be narrowed, okay, throughout the course. Otherwise, they will never get to work effectively with these parents. So we have to work a lot on the emotional plane to be able later for these participants to work with parents and cross the cultural barrier. There is a lot of barriers, of roadblocks, which are cultural in nature. These parents occupy different social locations from the participants, from the prospective teachers, from the actual teachers, etc. So there is a mental roadblock which is bridged by a lot of prejudices, misconceptions, etc. So imagine all these prejudices sitting in front of me, and I just walk in and prescribe a lecture, and you walk out. Do you think there is any change there? No way. No way. No way. Okay? So this is a further explanation of what we're doing right now. Lectures will not change people. Will not change people. Okay? So you need direct contact. And as I said, one of the fundamental needs, from my experience at least, encountered when it comes to teachers or prospective teachers is this emotional barrier. So this need, this outcome, very important for teachers and prospective teachers to cross the border. And that border is not just rational, it's not just understanding, it's not just knowledge, but it's also emotional in nature. Okay? Teachers cannot make the bridge emotionally. So we have to work on that. And that explains why a good number, okay, of our outcomes are emotional in nature. And that is where Paulo Freire, okay, emphasizes. Okay? We are not just rational human beings, we are emotional. Okay? So that is a very important dimension that we obviously address. Now, with regard to content, that is, as you can see, okay, I will not belabor the point. I will let you know how content is developed in process as we get from one stage to the other. So those are the outcomes, and this is where we start. Stage one, the site. So we're talking about parents. So we will make conscious choices about who these parents are, where these parents are coming from. We do not address the national level, of course. We have to focus on a particular community. And obviously, from my experience, from my sociological background, from my scientific research, obviously I'm very conscious of which sites would suit this particular course. So I would choose myself the site. And the site is a community which is predominantly working class, which has a history of high illiteracy rates, which has a history of high unemployment rates, because obviously this is a chain. Once you start with one, you continue. So this is the community I'll be working with. Okay? So choosing the site and choosing with whom you want to work is very important. So the choice of the site, okay, corresponds to the initial slide, the scientific research. So I have a very clear idea who these parents are. I have a very clear idea of the correlation between these parents' cultural background, okay, educational background, and their children's, educational achievement. So I went straight to this community. So this will be the community of practice and learning that I will be working with. Now, specific choice of parents. How do I do it? So first I selected the site. Second challenge would be who will be working with us. The parents that we will be obviously working with. Now for this to happen, from my experience as an adult educator, you need gatekeepers. Now, there are two gatekeepers in each community who are very, very important stakeholders. The country I live in is becoming ever more secular, but the church is still very present, okay, in everyday life. So the parish priest in every community is a very strong, gatekeeper. The other gatekeeper is the secular gatekeeper, the mayor of the place, the mayor of the community. So these are two gatekeepers who can open doors to a person like myself. I cannot just walk into any community and recruit parents. It will not work. So strategically and tactically, okay, I go through gatekeepers for recruitment. Okay, and that is exactly what I do. Go to these two people, share with them my experience, share with them my goals and outcomes and objectives, and then obviously discuss the way forward. And that is exactly what they do. So basically, they make a call themselves, okay? They make an open invitation themselves, okay? And obviously people would come voluntarily. So we will wait until we get a decent group of parents to participate. Now, while that is happening, at the university front, this is where I start, a needs analysis. So basically what I do is distribute a questionnaire to check for possible prejudices, for possible misconceptions, for possible negative ideas, okay, about parents. So I give them a questionnaire which includes case studies, okay, and they have to react to these case studies of failure, of criminality, etc. So when I start with these participants, I will not take anything for granted. I do not assume. I do not have any time to waste. I start where the students are in terms of knowledge. So I build rather than assume, okay? So one of the feedbacks that we get on a regular basis is that, you assume that we know nothing, you assume that we are prejudiced, etc. So I'm always starting now from a needs analysis, okay? A short questionnaire with case studies to see where our students are in terms of their assumptions, in terms of their prejudices, etc., etc. So this is where I start, a needs analysis, okay? While that is happening and I am analyzing where they are, obviously we start sessions. And the first sessions are theoretical. So we are not shying away from building the participants into intellectuals with strong theoretical background. Okay, so we're not doing away with the baby and the bath, as we say in English. Okay, so we retain the fact that the first sessions will be theoretical, will be engagement with texts, etc. So basically what we have here in stage 3, a needs analysis, so a better understanding from my part of who these students are, okay, where they're coming from, what is their knowledge regarding parents, etc. And obviously on the basis of that needs analysis, we build the theory. So there is theory, there is intellectual preparation, okay, but it's in sync, okay, with the needs analysis. Now, while they are doing all this, there was a question yesterday on assessment, okay, we do not do an assessment at the end, but we ask participants to keep a journal. So after each session, they have to write a reflection, and they keep it, okay, and build it, and obviously go back to it, and reframe it, etc. So assessment is done, 80% of it, in terms of journal keeping. There are no exams, okay, but reflections. Remember where we started, the importance of critical reflection, the importance of engaging with the world. How can you emphasize that and then you give a rote learning, exam? Contradictions galore. So when we are analyzing, our courses, we have to look for consistency, okay? And we have to eliminate consistency. We cannot talk about critical reflection. We cannot talk about engagement with the world and then assess in the most traditional of ways, where you see students, learning by heart things and repeating them at the end. That's rubbish, okay? That's rubbish. They will get nothing out of it. And students have been telling us year after year, we're getting nothing out of that, okay? You're showing off, but we are getting nothing. So that is something that we have to listen to. And not just listen, change. And that is exactly what I'm doing here with this course, okay? Okay, so basically these are the introductory sessions, okay? Well, obviously introductory sessions will familiarize students with critical pedagogy, with social justice education, and the theory, and this is where Paulo Freire would come in. Stage 4, interesting. So before they enter the community, our students do what we refer to as secondary investigation. So they learn about the community by doing research through secondary sources. What's the level of education? What's the level of unemployment? What's the level of health within this community? So they learn about the community before they enter the community. And that is called secondary investigation. So one of the things that Paulo Freire would say, never walk into a community and start preaching. First, acclimatize yourself with the community. First, familiarize yourself with the community. And then you dare talk or speak with the community. So this is part of it. Secondary investigation, where students will not walk into the community before they learn more about the community through official documents, statistics, etc., etc. And while they are learning about the community, we do tutorials. So we are talking about the community based on secondary investigation, okay, on secondary sources. So it's not just collecting data, but analyzing data in the process. And while we are analyzing data, we are talking about the community. And that's where prejudices start coming out. And that's where dialogue starts coming in, and challenging and questioning and problematizing certain ideas about the community. After stage 4, we have, of course, stage 5, which is primary investigation. So by this time, our students are ready to walk into the community. So they start walking into the community, mixing with people, okay, all over the place. It could be, a band club, it could be a coffee shop, it could be the street market, etc. Mixing with people and taking pictures and doing all kinds of things to record that experience. So once that stage is ready, they come back to university and we start discussing now and comparing secondary investigation with primary investigation. Okay, your impressions now, your interactions. What did you learn from these interactions, etc. So here, further acclimatization, further familiarization, okay, with the community through primary investigation. First, encounter with parents. This is where parents come in at this stage. So we are prepared theoretically, we are prepared intellectually, we have done our dialogues regarding our impressions of the community, impressions of the parents. It's all impressionistic. Now the real thing comes in. When parents come in and discuss with students based on pictures, based on secondary investigations, the themes, okay, that come out. And lots of themes come out, ranging from health to employment to parenting to education, etc. So these are the themes generated through dialogue, okay, generated through dialogue with parents, So this is the content. As you can see, content is developing. It started off with theoretical preparation, then secondary investigation, then primary investigation, then knowledge created and recreated through direct dialogue with parents. On parents' terms, by the way, parents do not come to university, we go to the community. And the mayor has been, generous enough to offer space where we can meet. So we do not ask parents to come, okay? We do the act of humility and we go to the community, okay? And dialogue with parents in their community. So this is the moment where our knowledge as academics and as participants, as students, is bounced off against the experiential knowledge of parents. And in the process of bouncing off, new knowledge is being created. And that's the content, basically, the new content of the course. First encounter with parents. Decodification here. Sorry. Yeah. Okay, so basically, there is a stage where parents and students decide, we have generated a lot of knowledge, we've tackled a lot of issues, let's focus on two issues in depth. And generally it's education, it could be health, etc., etc. And that's when I bring experts in the field of health, for example, to dialogue, okay, to dialogue with parents and participants on health issues, on the intersection of health, on education, how health impacts education, how poverty impacts education, and I bring experts. Housing is another issue, so I bring in experts on housing, etc. So I added a new dimension now, the experts dimension who's coming out. Another level now of content as it is building. See, content is building. It's not prescribed in the very beginning. It's a journey that we are following together. So decodification through two in-depth issues will be stage number 7. Action. You remember, there's no transformation without action. So after all this, we decide on one topic and then obviously design an action project. What can we do now that we know much more, okay, about, for example, the intersection of poverty and education? And that's where we design a project, a small project, because obviously we are limited by time, but at least participants learn to work with and not on behalf of. It's the pedagogy that I'm interested in. It's not the size of the project, but it's the process of working with rather than working on behalf of. So to eliminate this idea that parents, working class parents, are deficient. They are worthy of working on. They can produce. They can contribute. And that is what stage 8 is all about. Dissemination, of course. We do not keep it private. We go public, and there are different ways of doing it. I'm running out of time here. Now, what's revolutionary here is the assessment. So assessment, basically, it's 80% reflective journals, and that is my role, okay, to assess. But look at the other 20%. Parents are involved in the remaining 20%. Did they see any change in our students as far as attitude is concerned, as far as knowledge is concerned, as far as their outreach is concerned, as far as their collectivity is concerned, as far as their ability to work with us is concerned? 20%. Okay? This is almost scandalous by university standards. Parents, together with us, okay, involved in peer assessment. This is how we change things and make it credible by being consistent. So as far as assessment is concerned, I had a direct question yesterday. Here you have the answer. So 80% is reflective journals, because for us, reflection is very important. Okay, and reflection means basically reflecting on the here and now, but also bringing in theory, because we have to look at sophisticated analysis of the situation. Okay, but then 20% is co-assessment, where parents have a say, okay, on the remaining 20% of the assessment. So parents are involved in the design, in the development, okay, and in the assessment of the course. And this is what I mean by parents as active agents and not objects of our observation. And that is the end of my show, of my gig. Thank you very much. Questions? Yes. the moment of this project, seeing parents very much involved in, challenging, in questioning. This is empowerment for parents. Gaining this confidence, the emotional dimension, gaining this confidence to exchange, but not just exchange passively, but exchanging actively with university graduates, because obviously we're talking about prospective teachers, but we're also talking about in-service teachers. Okay, so people who are graduates already with a master's, a situation which generally, is intimidating to, parents. Seeing these parents gaining confidence and exchanging and obviously challenging, assumptions, knowledges of these graduate students of ours. So that, for me, was the defining moment where you see parents generally coming from a culture of silence moving into a culture of agency. And that is precisely the goal, of this course. Moving from passivity into activity. Moving out of the culture of silence into a culture of agency. If I can get that all the time, I would be laughing. Okay? Yeah, thank you. More questions, perhaps? Statements? Contradictions? Doubts?
No one has one more.
Yeah, go ahead.
And the challenge, the main challenge.
The main challenge. Okay. The main challenge would be coordinating all this. This is very complex. It's much easier for me to walk into a classroom and start. And as I said, I can go on and on and on and on. Okay? That is the easy thing. The challenge is coming out of your comfort zone, realizing that you're not being effective, however good you are as an academic. Okay? You're doing nothing. You're wasting time. Your time, their time. Okay? So this is the challenging moment. Realizing after so many years that, I'm not being effective. Being humble about it and accepting it as a fact. That is the challenging moment. Once I accepted it, I went on. And students are, with it. They want it because they are looking for consistency. The worst thing that students hate is the inconsistency. Preaching one thing and doing the other. Dewey would say, as far as democracy is concerned, you don't preach democracy, you do democracy. And your pedagogy has to be democratic. And that is exactly what I'm trying to do, in a humble way. Yes?
Sorry, I missed it. How big this group was?
Sorry?
How big the group was, the student group?
Well, we're talking about 20.
Okay.
Yeah, obviously you cannot do it with 100 students.
Yeah, yes.
Okay, and unfortunately, I have that kinds of situations. I try my best to be dialogical, even with 100 students. What I do basically there is I give them the readings. I expect them to come into the class already with the readings, and then I start dialoguing. I refuse, to transmit knowledge. So if there is no reading in class, I would walk out. That is my, stance. So if you want dialogue, if you want me to respect you as intellectuals, you have to do your work. And that is how I do dialogue with 100 people. The assumption is that they have read, the literature. And I don't have to repeat it, through transmission. If that didn't happen, I would walk out. As simple as that. There is a contract. There is a contract. I mean, it's a two-way.
Very good idea.
It's a two-way No, I'm sorry, but it's a two-way process. I do not pretend, in my life. I'm very honest with everyone, If you want dialogue, it's a two-way process, It can't be a monologue, and you talk and you pretend that it is a dialogue. So the assumption is, I think it's still possible, difficult with 100 people to dialogue, but this is how it worked with me. The assumption is you're coming into this class prepared. If you're not prepared for the dialogue, so there's no dialogue. So it's a commitment. It's very, very clear, I'm ready to do my part, but you have to do your part, It's a basic, human contract here that we have. Yeah.
Did you encounter any skepticism or hesitations by the parents?
Mm,
Take part from the teacher?
no, not at all. Okay, not at all. They were very appreciative. By the way, we give them a token fee. Okay, we don't want exploitation here. Okay, I'm very sensitive to exploiting people. So it's a token, you know, of appreciation. It's small, okay, but yes, we do give them a token of appreciation. So no, there's no skepticism. As I said, I go through gatekeepers. So obviously they come because there was a call from people who they respect in the community, the mayor, you know, and the parish priest. So there's already that bond, okay, happening. So I come in not as a total stranger, but as a dear friend of the gatekeepers. So, you know, I'm trusted basically from the word go, okay? Yeah.
How would you respond to a criticism that this kind of approach is actually contributing to this kind of unconstructive identity politics?
Okay, identity politics, well, the scientific fact is that if we do not interrupt, okay, this correlation between socioeconomic status and education, society will reproduce, okay, this fundamental fact. Now, I am a strong believer of early childhood education, so indirectly, I would say to the gatekeepers, if you can attract parents of children who are between 0 and 7 years. I strongly believe, and this is scientific, it's not just a belief, that, you know, the first stages of the child's life are fundamental. So we need to address social justice very early, not only in the child's life, but also in the family's life. Through research, we know that there is a what we refer to in sociology as a parental gap. Okay? So children are born into privileged situations, but also children are born into underprivileged situations. And unless we intervene as a state effectively within the family and through early childhood, high quality early childhood provision, there is no way we can rupture this cycle of education underachievement. Okay? So it's born out of a scientific fact. I don't think it's identity politics here. We're doing justice. And we know that it has nothing to do with genes. It has nothing to do with a divine plan. It's structural. It is structural. And unless we intervene structurally and materially by building up the cultural capital, you know, of parents very early in the child's life, then we're in for this reproduction. So school on its own will not make the difference. School accounts for roughly 30% of the child's life. The rest is outside school. So unless we intervene in the ecologies, in the habitats, okay, of our students, whether it's family, whether it's neighborhood, etc., there is no way we can rupture this cycle. Another thing which we know scientifically is that education can make a difference, but it cannot make the difference. And there is a qualitative difference here. Okay? So basically, there is a correlation between education and achievement and economy, education and achievement and poverty, education and achievement and health, etc. So unless we intervene holistically, and that is something for the state to do, there will be no way we can interrupt this cycle. So I wouldn't say it's identity politics, it's social justice, perhaps at its best, okay? And obviously we need to intervene because of our, you know, conception of social justice. Social justice goes beyond offering, you know, education for free. That is not enough for social justice. Social justice is measured, if you want to talk measurement, in terms of outcomes. And that is where we are failing as a country. So we're opening doors, but when they come out of those doors, unfortunately, not even when it comes to basic competencies, they're not there. Okay? And it has nothing to do with IQ. It has nothing to do, okay, with genes, as I said. It has a lot to do with structural barriers to achievement. And that's where we have to attack, okay, these structural barriers to underachievement. That has been understood scientifically. We have to act, and we have to act very fast, okay? So thank you for your question. More.
I have a question about state support in Malta. Is it like government is promoting this approach? in
Okay,
education?
okay. Well, the government is very much aware. Through our counter-information and counter-discourse, the government is very uneasy, because obviously the government that we have right now has a history of social democracy. So for the present government to have such a high percentage of working-class children who are underperforming is serious business. They're doing a lot. They're doing a lot, but unfortunately they are not assertive enough. By assertive, I mean basically they create projects and expect parents to come to these projects. The underprivileged in high numbers will not come. So we have to go. And this is exactly my course, where we have to go to the community and not wait for parents to come to us. It will not work that way. So the government is pumping money, okay? Pumping a lot of money, okay? But the social justice dimension is only partial. Let me give you one example to your answer, to your question. Let's take early childhood education, 0 to 3. For me, that is a very important moment. So since 2015, our government is offering now childcare for free. Imagine, childcare for free. Obviously, there is a reason, and the reason is that up to that date, the presence of women in the world of work was relatively low compared to the European average. Okay, we have a welfare gap, so the government was, encouraging women or mothers to come out and work. Okay, in a situation where women outperform men educationally. This is the contradiction, So even in PISA, girls outperform boys in all subjects. So that is the situation back home. But obviously, this childcare provision was provided for economic reasons, not for social justice reasons. So women started coming out, but it's mainly middle-class women who came out. So again, pumping money, giving the provision, but the results are not there in terms of social justice. See? So this is my idea. If we go and adopt a social justice approach, then it means basically that we target parents, particular parents, who are never, caught on the radar of education. This is what we need to do. Be present in the community and assertively create programs with this in mind. Not for children, but for parents and children. Okay? That is the strategy. So this is the situation right now. It has nothing to do with money. It has nothing to do with resources. It has to do with vision and strategy.
Unless I imagine 4 years, we would not be able to establish something like that with the government.
Well, I mean, we did it. The economy is booming, so the economy is helping. So it has to do with money too. Okay? Yes, but the government did one good thing, and the government said, okay, we're going to invest millions, but we are going to create more wealth through people coming out, okay, in the economy. Plus, as I said, we have a welfare gap, so we have a serious problem with an aging population. So we need more and more people, to serve that reality. So this is how we're doing it, through, encouraging women to come out and obviously importing foreigners to come into the economy, okay? So it has to do with economics, but less with social justice, and that is the problem, Yeah. Any other issues, questions, statements? If not, no? So thank you very much for your attention. Oh, thank you. Yeah, my pleasure. Oh, thank you so much. Much appreciated. Thank you.